Good morning, and thank you for showing up after last night's festivities. I know it's always a little bit hard, especially here in Dublin. So as usual, I have something to wake you up, which is just a little bit of an audio cue. Let's see if it works. And I have the wrong slide deck up, see? Apparently I was the one who was out too late last night. Making slides, though. Okay. That's what I was doing last night while you drank alcohol. So the way the format here works, just to give you a little bit of a set of context, in the first session here, what I'll do is just spend a little bit of time talking about things that are on my mind. And with that, hopefully I'll introduce some different ways of thinking, some new ideas, kind of get our heads moving in directions maybe that are useful. And then in the second half, after the break, what I will do is just take questions from you. And I'll probably kick that off with an example of how I may answer such questions, just to put us on the same page of what kinds of things should we be talking about and where. Our general theme, however, is not about running experiments, not about marketing, but really about the experience that our customers get on today's computing platform. And today's computing platform is not really mainframes, it's not really PCs, it's mobile. So we'll be talking all about mobile, we'll be talking all about mobile design, and we'll be talking about how to make sure that we have the right impact and create the right kinds of experiences. So this year, I've been referencing a moment that happened about 10 years ago, because I think it's kind of widely acknowledged at this point that this is when our modern computing era kicked off, the mobile era, right? Because it was about 10 years ago, in 2007, that the introduction of this device happened, right? The iPhone. And when they demoed the first iPhone, they called it kind of a new product, and in particular, what Steve Jobs said was he wants to make a leapfrog thing that is way smarter than anything else has been. A leapfrog product, right? So this is a good timestamp to reference, because what you can do, and I think it's kind of useful, is go back to what things looked like 10 years ago, right? At the end of 2006 or so. What was the situation with computing devices? The things that we all use to connect to the internet, get stuff done, talk to people, right? How did things look about 10 years ago? Well, 10 years ago, this is how many devices were shipped worldwide. And what you can see is there was about 240 million personal computers shipped at the end of that year. A pretty reasonable amount of computers making to the market. And there were actually smartphones. There was about 70 million smartphones shipped that year across the planet. But what they looked like is a little bit different, right? And few people would say they were personal computers, but they looked a little bit something like this. The old BlackBerry Q. Does anybody remember that little roller ball thing? Yeah? Actually, the roller thing was kind of a common theme across all these devices, right? There's the Motorola Q, the Palm Treo 680. These devices were okay for email, right? And a lot of people actually got attached to them. We had a saying, at the time these were out, I was working at Yahoo, and we had this phrase called the BlackBerry prayer, because when people were at meetings, they would be like, oh yeah, no, yeah, okay, sure, yeah, do that. And then a week later, they're like, huh? I never said that. That ever happened to you? No? So this is what smartphones looked like back then, right? And going forward, right, what happened over the past 10 years with these devices? Well, if we sort of take the trajectory that PCs took and we go forward to the end of 2016, you can see kind of not too much, right? From 240 million of these devices shipped per year to about 270 million. It sort of grew for a while, but then since then it's been steadily on the decline and continues to kind of fall each year. So that's not so exciting. But what is very exciting is the number of mobile devices. In this case, this is the smartphones and tablets line. And if you look at how many of these things are shipped per year, it's about 1.8 billion or so. And I always have to point out, because somebody in the audience usually asks, well, isn't this line flattening? Is that a problem? It's roughly 7 billion people on the planet right now. 5 billion or so of them are considered, quote unquote, adults, aka people who would actually purchase something like this. And so 2 billion a year out of a potential 5 billion market, that's a pretty good place to plateau, right? It's a very planet scale kind of peak. So to me, I think that's actually fine that they're sitting right up there. So what do we take away from this? Lots of devices, right? A huge amount more than we were dealing with in the past. Now, when lots of these devices enter the market, that means lots of people start using them. And if you look now at the impact on audience size, this is Facebook's monthly active users, again, 10 years ago. So in 2006, they ended that year with about 12 million desktop monthly active users. Right? And over the 10-year period that happened since then, here's kind of the story for desktop users on Facebook. You can see they kind of followed a similar trajectory, a little more pronounced here than what happened with actual device shipments. But they grew about 10x. So now they have roughly 120 million desktop monthly active users as opposed to just 12 million, kicking things off. So mobile, should we put the mobile monthly active users on the line? Right, almost 1.8 billion mobile monthly active users. Cumulatively now in 2017, I think they've crossed 2 billion. So still growing, and this is really the line that's causing all of that growth still. But not only do devices grow, but the people using them grow, right? And you start to see the same patterns emerge in people's user bases. Now, you may say, okay, well, Facebook's this big established company, so yeah, they kind of grow. What about new offerings and new entrants? Well, in 2006, there was an app that was the fastest growing app of all time. Any idea what that app was? Most downloaded, fastest growing app ever to that point 10 years ago. Guesses? YouTube? Twitter? MySpace? These all sound like websites. App. Think 10 years ago. There was no WhatsApp 10 years ago. I know it's hard. When I was in Amsterdam, somebody yelled out, Heineken drinking app. That remains my favorite answer to this question ever. Because no, it was not the Heineken drinking app. And once I tell you, you'll kind of be like, oh yeah, remember Skype? Ah, see, there's a collective, yeah. Skype. Skype was a big deal, right? Skype got bought 3 times. It got bought by eBay, then bought by a private equity firm, and then got bought by Microsoft yet again. So it took Skype 630 days to reach 40 million users. This was the fastest growing downloaded app at the time, right? Like app that you install. And people were blown away by this. Now, if I were to fast forward to where we're at today with mobile, things are a little bit different because the fastest growing app to date on the modern computing platform is a Super Mario Run. On just iOS, in 4 days, it hit 40 million users. And again, I always get this comment, yes, that line should actually be much more straight, but then you wouldn't see it, I'm sorry. Somewhere, some information design professor is rolling over in his grave, but I apologize. So pretty big difference. And while we're at this, actually, we can talk about this for a second. So it took Super Mario Run 4 days to hit 40 million users. It took it about 1 day to hit 10 million users. What about Pokemon Go? How many days do you think it took Pokemon Go to hit 10 million users? You know Pokemon Go, right? Yeah, everyone knows that. So how many days to 10 million? I heard 14. Half a day? Yeah, okay. He's very confident about that. It's actually 2 days for Pokemon Go. Okay, the fastest growing of all the Angry Birds games, which was Angry Birds Space. And by the way, originally I got this wrong, and then Angry Birds Space itself tweeted at me, no, actually, we grew this fast. So I have it on pretty good source, the actual game itself. 5 days? Others? The original number I had, by the way, was 6 days, and they came back to me and no, it was 3. Okay, this one is always my favorite. Google Plus. So yeah, that's what everybody does. These are just numbers. I'm just stating facts here. Ideas? 20? Not bad. 16, which is arguably some of the reasons why some of the other social networks at that time kind of put all hands on deck when this product came out. Okay, somebody mentioned Twitter earlier as one of our first answers. How many days did it take Twitter to hit 10 million users? 30? Other ideas? 250? Getting closer. 780 days. All right, and we have to wrap this up with Facebook. How many days? 1,000? Close. 852. So things have changed pretty dramatically, right? When you look at some of the things that used to be the fastest growing services of our time and the things that are today. And this is the impact of all these devices and the audiences that we now have available to us, right? Okay, so lots of devices, lots of audiences, both things growing very aggressively, but is anybody making any money? This is always the question, right? And to answer this one, let's look at PayPal, and this is PayPal's mobile payment volume per year. So 10 years ago, if we wind back the clock again, they made about 900K in total mobile payments. What happened 10 years later? You can't even see it, by the way, because 10 years later, it hit 102 billion. From 900K to 102 billion in a 10-year period. That's pretty freaking crazy, in my opinion. To continue talking about money for half a second, we can look at the biggest online shopping days, right? The biggest days for e-commerce. In the United States, the biggest single online shopping day. We hadn't had this holiday shopping period, right? It's actually starting now. Woo! But the biggest online shopping day in the US is affectionately called Cyber Monday. And Cyber Monday, 10 years ago, did $610 million worth of sales in one day, online. That's pretty good. Over the past 10 years, that number has continued to grow. It's grown roughly 5x or so. And in 2016, last year, we'll find out what it is this year. I bet it's higher. We hit 3.4 billion in online sales in one day. Now, relevant to our conversation, in the United States, about 30% of those sales happen on mobile. Not like traffic, but actual sales completed happened on mobile devices. Now, to sort of show you kind of both a contrast and an opportunity at the same time, let's look at China's online shopping and their biggest online shopping day. It actually didn't start 10 years ago. It kicked off around 2009, and it is a day called Singles Day. And Singles Day last year in China did almost 18 billion in online sales in one day. So, a little bit of a gap. Another gap, 85% or so of sales completed on Singles Day happened on mobile. Right? So I really like this chart, A, because it just shows kind of the scale we're dealing with, but B, it also illustrates a lot of the opportunity space that we have here. Right? And people can argue this or not, but in general, e-commerce and a lot of the online stuff kicked off a little bit later in China, right, than it did in the US. And as a result, they got onto mobile in a much more aggressive and faster way. Some would use the word leapfrog. I don't know if I would necessarily use the word leapfrog. But mobile is much more of an established thing there, perhaps for a variety of reasons. Now, the average in the United States is about 30% of sales completed on mobile, which when you see some of those charts around the growth of mobile devices and the growth of mobile audiences seems a bit low. But that doesn't mean that individual companies and groups of people who take this stuff seriously can't do a lot better. So for example, Walmart, which is a really big retailer in the United States, last year, 70% of their holiday traffic, and I'm looking at different holidays here. This one's Thanksgiving, this one's Black Friday, but it's all part of this kind of holiday shopping thing in the US. So 70% of their traffic was on mobile, and 60% of their orders happened on mobile. So they're at double what the average is by taking a concentrated effort on this. Target, which is another kind of large retailer in the United States, on Cyber Monday, which is the day we were referencing before, they also had a 60% completion rate on mobile devices. And so what I often hear from people around mobile is, well, mobile doesn't convert as well as desktop. And if that's kind of the mindset you come into this with, that you kind of are what you measure, if you will, in some ways. And if you take a different approach, this is ASOS, which is a UK fashion retailer. Instead of saying something like that, what they say is, have you seen that chart of mobile? It's crazy. That is our priority, right? We are doubling down and focusing on making the best experiences on mobile, and we are trying to make it better than any other experience we have. So for them, 80% of their traffic in the UK is on mobile. Globally, it's about 70%. And 70% of their purchases in the UK happen on mobile. Globally, it's around 60%. Right? And I think this is one of the most important things to all this stuff, which is to take advantage of all these charts I'm showing you and these trends. You have to have a mindset change, right? You can't kind of just keep doing business as usual. And putting this deliberate focus on mobile retail obviously has paid off in all the examples I've shown you. So anyway, last 10 years have been pretty transformative, right? And what I want to do now, though, is kind of back it up all the way to 1985, when the first of our personal computers kind of became popular, right? And so if you trace the amount of PCs that are now in use since 1985 all the way to the end of 2016 here, and this is relative to the global population that we've got, you'll see today there's 1.5, 1.6 or something like that personal computers active. This isn't sales per day now. This is how many are currently being used. If we look at smartphones, right, we sort of trace that trajectory, we're at around 3 billion. If you go forward a little to like where we're at in 2017, that number has actually crossed 3 billion, but I'm trying to keep that 10-year time scale here, right? We're actually a little bit past that. So roughly 3 billion. Mobile devices, now it's around 5 billion, but then it was just approaching about 5 billion. And people who could actually have one of these things, there's that line, roughly 5.5 billion. And so what I love about this chart is this is the planet, right? This is the globe. This is everything. And if you draw these lines here to cut us off at the past 10 years, let me throw that over there for a second. There you go. A lot of change, right? Over the past decade, some pretty big shifts have happened, especially when you look at smartphones, right? So this huge growth in devices has led to big audiences, that's led to big opportunities for revenue, and that's all well and good. I hope you all agree with me there. But what I'm actually most interested in talking about is we've gone through this 10-year period now. What have we learned? What have we learned about designing for these devices, for these audiences? What have we learned about making money off of them, right? How has our understanding of designing for this computing platform changed? And to do this again, you're going to see a theme here. I'm going to go back again 10 years, but this time not with charts, but with devices. This is the first iPhone that came out, and it had a camera. Anybody take pictures on a smartphone? Yeah. One or two of you, right? So you could take pictures back then, but there was only two things you could do. You could take a picture and you could look at it. Doesn't seem very good, does it? But that was all you could do. Of course, things have changed, right? Because since iOS 2, there was additional iOS 3, iOS 4, iOS 5, iOS 6, and iOS 7 editions. And you can see a lot more features came in. And of course, iOS 7 gave us flat design, right? You can kind of tell that. By the way, just as a quick aside, one of the key dangers of flat design here that I should make you all aware of. Some people say that's steam on the thing. I don't know if this is intentional or anyway, let's get that out of here. All right, back to this. Did they stop at iOS 7? No. They, of course, did iOS 8, iOS 9, iOS 10, and now iOS 11. And where before you could take a photo and view it, now you can take square photos, panoramic photos, live photos, portrait photos, videos, slow motion videos, time-lapse videos. You can switch between front and rear cameras. You can switch between telephoto and non-camera loops. You can make bounces, long exposure options. You can take your live photos and sort of twist them into these little animated GIFs or freeze single panes of them. You have filters you can turn off, timers, you have HDR, you've got flash, you've got these little grids for adjusting your stuff. It's just a whole onslaught of options, right? And so looking at all this cumulatively, like let's take those things and just sort of, there we go. So here's the progression we've been on over the past 10 years. And some people look at this and they say, this is feature creep, right? Look at them add all this stuff. It used to be so easy. Why couldn't they just stop at version blank? Right? They took something that used to be so easy and so simple, and now they've made it so complicated. And seeing it this way certainly kind of illustrates that argument. There's a lot more options than you used to have before. This is true. Other people look at this, and this tends to be people who are more like startup-minded, and they say, this is an amazing example of building a minimal viable product at scale. For those of you unfamiliar with that, it's like you make something that's great, and then you make it better and better and better and better. And people are happy to have a skateboard and a scooter and a bike and then a motorbike and then a car. They're just happy, happy, happy all the way through, right? So you start with the most basic need, take a picture, view it. If that's compelling and you see return on your investment, only then you invest in making it a bigger deal, right? Making it a more full-featured kind of experience. So you don't attempt to do too much up front until you know you've got product market fit, and then away you go and continue investing. So I figured it's worth asking you, is this feature creep? Anyone feel that way? No one. Okay. Is this a classic case of instead minimal viable product? Who thinks that's what's going on? Okay, 3 of you. Who hates raising their hand because they're hungover? Okay, 5 of you. The rest of you are my margin of error. So that's good. Actually, the last time I asked this question, I had the same kind of tepid response. And I was like, okay, well, so nobody really has an opinion here. And some guy raised his hand. He's like, no. And I was like, okay. It's like, I just prefer version 6. Okay. So I should have asked, who prefers version 6? Maybe I should just go through each of the versions, right? Where should we stop? Okay. What about when we add an equal amount of features to other parts of the mobile experience? So this is messaging, and I'm going to terrify you now. This is perhaps the scariest thing you'll hear all day today. But 10 years ago, you could only send text messages. There were no emoji. No emoji. Can you believe it? How did people live? Now, 10 years later, of course, not only are there emoji, but you can put like live videos in your messages. You can grab any picture you want. You don't just have to take the ones that are on your phone. You can also search for them with a whole bunch of apps. You can use your messaging thing like a walkie-talkie to do this plus thing and kind of talk. This is a weird one I found recently. You can record your heartbeat, and then you can draw on it. So you can just be like, pumpa, pumpa, it's for you, honey. What? I'm sorry, you don't do that? Saw you last night at the party. And of course, they can respond by downloading a pack of Love is in the Air stickers. There's like a whole category of wedding sticker apps. So I guess if someone you know is getting married, you'd install a bunch of these things and you're just like, bridesmaids rule or whatever. I don't know what's in there. I think it's something like that. Maybe I have it totally off. So lots of stuff now in messaging. Text, photos, videos, audio drawings, text gestures, touch gestures, tap gestures, any kind of thing you can think of in terms of stickers and other apps. It's all in there. What about sharing? Remember I showed you could take a picture. Do you know the only way you could get that picture off your phone to someone else is by emailing it to them? What kind of world was that, right? It's like a world run by AOL. And of course, this has changed dramatically. Now you can copy, print, duplicate, slideshow, AirPlay. You have this whole list of options, how you can PDF, Flickr, Slack, LinkedIn, Twitter, message, duplicate. I don't even know what kinds of things you can do with it, but the world is your oyster. There's a new option that allows you to take a picture and turn it into a watch face. So once again, the sky's the limit. Now, I should note, and just to be fair to Apple, there's some attempts to keep this in check, right? When you click to share, there's a couple options here. You actually have to go to this deeper menu, choose what you want on. You can rearrange it. Same with some of these activities. So there is some attempt to kind of keep this complexity in check, right? Not all features are up front. There's these, of course, discovery problems that happen with that, but they do make at least some attempt to manage this. But when we look at 10 years across all aspects of the operating system, camera, messaging, sharing, what's the cumulative effect of this stuff? Right? Is it empowering? Do we feel like superheroes with all of these capabilities? Or is it kind of terrifying and we don't really know what to do and we start to become afraid to touch things because who knows? I don't have a good answer to this. People who have certainly grown up with these devices make use of these capabilities, but what's it like for someone coming in new, right? And what about when we're not actually adding new features? Because one of the things we do all the time is add new features. One of the things we never do is remove features. But another thing we do all the time is redesign things. Has anybody ever redesigned something? Yes. Has anybody always redesigned the same thing? Yes. Well, let's look at something that's very simple. This is the calculator app in the first iPhone, again, going back 10 years. It stuck around for maybe 2 or 3 years, and then they redesigned it in iOS 3. Then they redesigned it in iOS 7. And recently, they just redesigned it again in iOS 11. And looking at this evolution over the past 10 years, I just sort of have to ask, have we come full circle? Does this add up to a set of well-rounded designs? Maybe they've just gone around and around. Perhaps they used circular logic. You might argue it's quite a calculated move. Should I stop? Okay, I'll stop. Getting away from Apple for a second. What about the types of design changes most of us work on when we make mobile apps, right? So this is Twitter, and Twitter in 2010 kind of woke up and realized they needed to do something on mobile with native apps. And so they bought this native app called Tweety, and they basically launched it as the Twitter official app. And so sometimes you can kind of see people's strategy bleeding through what they do in their product design. All right, so this was the first iteration. And I don't know for sure, but I think what drove this is we need an app. OK, we got one. Then they kind of learned a year later, people don't really understand Twitter. So let's add some labels. That should fix things, right? Call this Connect and Discover. Then, of course, 2013 was the year of flat design. Year after that, they're like, yeah, people still don't understand Twitter. So what if we just replace these weird symbols with other stuff? Maybe that'll fix it. Then the following year, somebody had the strategy of Twitter is real-time news. That's what we are. Yeah, let's tell everybody. So insert this moments thing. OK, crap. Nobody's using moments. What if we put it inside of search and kind of like force it into there? That may help, right? And then this year, just screw it. And again, I kind of have to ask. All right? 10 years. Now, just to contrast this for a second, this is what happened at Twitter over the past 10 years. This is what's happening on Facebook right now. Actually, let me go one step deeper. That's actually not true. This is what's happening on Facebook right now. By my count, there are at least 72 versions of the mobile nav live for Facebook users today on mobile. Now, some people like to call this an A to Z test. It's unclear if that's exactly what's going on. What I suspect they're doing is they're trying to have some kind of learning machine intelligence-driven algorithm that optimizes the navigation options based on your previous usage and things that they'd like to promote and change. Unclear if that's really being very effective, but I bet you if you play the Show Me Your Facebook app game, you'll all find very different navigations facing you. So, pretty interesting contrast between the two companies, right? One, 10 years of change, 7 years of change. The other one, 72 versions live right this second. I think they've certainly embraced the experimentation lifestyle that Bart talked about yesterday. OK, let's switch over to Android for a second and follow the progression of the eBay app. This is the first eBay Android app. This is the second eBay Android app. Here is the third eBay Android app. And again, remember how I told you can sort of see company strategy bleeding through inside of product designs? Right around here, eBay bought Red Laser, which was this barcode scanning app. And I remember that and know it because this is when they added this barcode scanning button to the top of the app. Now, of course, nobody knew what the hell that was. So in the next version of the eBay app, they put a little red line on it to make that a little bit clearer. High degree of likelihood nobody used that, so they put a big word that said scan next to the barcode label. And then, they kind of kept at it for a little bit. I think this is the 6th version. This, I believe, is the 7th. And then somewhere around the 8th version, they're like, screw it. And at this point, again, this is a suspicion. I believe search volume started going down. But they didn't really think too much about it, and they just kind of kept at it. And again, I think it hit its lowest point with this version. You can guess why. And I know that because the next version, search looks like this. And then they got into a period, okay, mobile is actually a really big deal, so let's add a whole bunch of crap to it. Right? This is, I think, like something like the 10th version. Now they've got eBay deals, deals frenzy, my feed of deals. Who knows what's going on there? Here we go. Further iterations. And then somewhere around like version 12, I think. Or maybe it was 13. I think it was 12. They did this material design change. And so anyway, let's just kind of pull this out. There we go. Now, I'm going to stop here. I've been showing you a whole bunch of stuff changing. And I'm going to get to the point, because though some of that is fun, what's the reason we're looking at all this stuff? Are we making any progress here? This is 10 years. Any of you work on like web design, mobile site design, mobile app design? Some of you? Okay, so I have a question that you can probably answer. How many meetings, how many emails, how many PowerPoint decks went into this process over 10 years? How much human effort, time was put into this over a 10-year period? And what's the end result? Have we just been moving pixels around? Now, I can guarantee you that this eBay app is probably performing way better than that first eBay app, right? Like a bunch of metrics are probably up, things are good. So is that time wasted? No. Right? They did a lot of good optimizations, learned a bunch of stuff, and created a better experience overall. But, fundamentally, does this have search? Yes. Does this have search? Yes. Does this have my eBay? Yes. Does this have my eBay? Yes. Right? Does this have items you can view? Yes. Does this have... So for 10 years, we've kind of been moving a lot of stuff around. And again, I'm sure lots of good things happen as a result of that. But I feel like I have to ask this question now that we're at this 10-year inflection point. Because here's why I'm asking it. I look at this and it reminds me of this. This is 30 years of Adobe Illustrator design on the desktop. Not 10 years, 30 years of Adobe Illustrator design. And what's happened? Certainly a bunch of features have been added. Check. Some pixels have been moved around. Check. Right? But are we heading down the same road as these desktop applications and all these graphical user interfaces? 20 years from now, am I going to show you a chart this long of the eBay Android app? Right, and say, hey, look, looks a little different now. Are we, and this is kind of the stuff I personally struggle with, are we just applying the same processes and the same results from what we've done before now with the mobile design process and with the results and the types of activity that we get there, right? Or are we just doing this same thing on these smaller screens? And it's worth asking this because you kind of want to get to the point of, is there an opportunity to do more? Right? Are we selling ourselves short here? Remember all those crazy charts I showed you before? There's never been an opportunity like this before in terms of the number of devices on the planet relative to the amount of humans that we have on the planet. The amount of opportunity to make money, to create audiences, all these things, it's just like crazy. And yet, here we are, doing kind of what we've always done, right? And I want to, of course, point out, as I said with the eBay example, there's nothing wrong with iteration. Iteration is great. Iteration teaches us stuff. It helps us make things better, right? I think that is a wonderful, worthwhile process, and we should be doing it. But it really depends on where we're iterating to. Right? Knowing kind of where we're going with all this stuff could drive whether or not all that iteration takes us to the desired outcome we have, right? So, for instance, there's been a couple things, and I actually love the program before because it highlighted several of the things that I talk about frequently that web standards and companies like Google and others are taking very, very seriously now that they haven't for years. But there's these linchpin moments in user experiences where things just break, right? Where there's huge friction, things kind of fall off a cliff. One of the biggest ones is sign-in and usernames and passwords and all this kind of stuff, right? People auth to systems about 15 times a day. And I think that number has been going up over time. And as we saw before, 60% or 56% of the time when somebody encounters sign up in a checkout flow, they abandon. And there's some other crazy number, I don't remember what the 92% number was, but it was something bad as well, right? Like, this is very bad stuff. And by the way, I have worked at eBay, Yahoo, and Google, and I wish I could share with you the cumulative numbers that we've seen around sign up and sign in. It's not a good story. At the Chrome Dev Summit, actually I'm going to make sure I say this right. Let me find this little stat that they put out at the Chrome Dev Summit. What was it, about a month ago? Give me uno secundo and I will find it. Okay, here we go. So, authentication sign-in is one of the biggest reasons people don't return to websites. And they had a fun little picture of this. Oh. Hey. No? Over here? Okay. Ah, there you go. Hey! Okay. Was that worth it? I don't know. But hey. I showed it to you. It's a problem. Okay? Why is it a problem? Here's a wonderful example. I have this comic book reading service. I like to read comic books. And then one day I get this crap, right? And I end up with something that has 8 characters, 1 capital letter, 1 lowercase letter, 1 number, and 1 special character, because all the other characters aren't special enough to fall into this class. But you know, their definition of special is not everybody else's definition of special. And so then you have to create this monstrosity, and then you go to your mobile phone, right? And guess what? You can't see the damn thing because they put the little dots on it. So it's really nice when companies like Amazon at least give you the option to see the damn thing, so you can see what you typed in there. And these mistakes, this isn't just a nicety on Amazon's part. These mistakes actually add up, right? 75% of the time when somebody's got something in their shopping cart and they go down this password recovery loop, they don't buy what they had in their shopping cart. And implementing something like show password, e-commerce companies like Etsy have pushed studies that say it's statistically significant decrease. I can't say that. Can you just read that? Something good thing happened. Too many ST words in there for me. So this is good. This has been shown to reduce failed logins, which add up to money. And it works like this because in studies that we've done, you can see when people go to tap that show thing and then they see their characters, they actually use this. So 75% of people in this study use the show thing, and 88% of them actually unmasked it after they saw that first character show up. So people use this stuff. Not only does it create an impact, but people use it. But that method, you know, tapping show requires work on people's part. They need to notice it. They need to tap on the show button. So in the next version here, what Amazon did is they show it by default, and they gave you a little hide password option. So if you tap hide password, then you can actually bring back the dots if you want. This makes sense too. And the reason why this makes sense is if you just show people their password by default like this, what happens is 80% of people don't expect it because we've poisoned them, and 60% say they become suspicious. Oh, it's really suspicious. Why are they showing my password? You don't want people thinking, you know, that when they're trying to buy something. So this tiny little change, if you just put that little option to show your password, makes all the difference in the world. What happens here is 100% notice that checkbox, and now all of them, instead of thinking there's an error and being suspicious, they view this as a feature. Well, thank you for doing that for me. They view it as a usability enhancement. And I'm going to pause here for just a second because I think a lot of time this gets forgotten, and it sort of speaks to the swearing Scottishman, the swearing Scotsman at the beginning of the conference. Right? A lot of the things that irked him, there were some big things, but a lot of things were really small things that we just don't pay attention to. And the reason why we don't pay attention to them is I think many times we underestimate the impact of small tweaks. Small tweaks can make huge differences. We literally went from 60% of people thinking this is suspicious and being freaked out to 100% of people feeling like this is for their benefit, with just one little checkbox and phrase. Right? And if you identify enough of these little opportunities, they can actually have a tremendous impact. So with this, people think it's good, and then Amazon kind of went a little bit further, and in today's world, there's this little show password checkbox, but when you type, it actually shows your password below, so you kind of get the benefit of both worlds. It looks sort of secure, but you can still see it below, and you can hide it if you want to. And this is where they're at today with this interaction. Now, so lots of iteration on what is an important issue, right? I do believe this is a hugely important thing, and I think it's fantastic that they went from you can't even see it, to then tap to reveal it, to show it by default, to tap to hide it, now reveal it below as you type, all these good things around. But remember the kind of whole beginning that we talked through. Are we just taking this desktop problem that we had before and now just trying to force it to kind of work better on mobile? Is that what's going on here? We're just moving those pixels around and just really, trying to make the best out of a really shitty situation. It's kind of what it feels like, right? Because after all of this, here's what Amazon implemented on iOS. No password, just put your fingerprint on it. You don't have to type anything. No need for this hide, show, password toggle thing. You just put your thumb on it and you're done. Right? And so iteration is awesome, and you can see it made things a lot better on Amazon for a really important thing, but we need a vision. And that vision, ideally it's pretty far out and really improves things that matter. Getting people authenticated really matters. It has a huge kind of benefit both to them and to businesses. But what is this vision where we can go? And as we go about optimizing all this stuff for today, we need to think about what is our North Star? Where do we want to get to? And I said I really liked the setup I got yesterday because it shows that people are taking this stuff seriously now. So Google has this one-tap sign-up and automatic sign-in stuff available to you now. And inside of The Guardian, the example that they showed was if you tap sign-in, it just automatically signs you in by creating a secure, tokenless, passwordless account on your site that's backed by people's Google account. And so you're in with this personalized experience. So addressing one of these key things and trying to make it nice and simple, and that there's a whole bunch of early positive results from this kind of stuff that just illustrates this stuff is important, right? AliExpress has 11% boost in conversion, 85% less sign-in failures, 10% increase in sign-ins on Pinterest. Guardian, there was another one that they shared at the Chrome Dev Summit if you want to look at it. And you can take a look at making this happen. So really trying to get to a point where this is much less of an issue. Right now, getting it down to one tap, which is great. But let's just sort of check back on reality today. I have an overseas bank account. This is literally the screen that I have to use to log into it. It's primarily a mobile account. All the stuff is kind of done through like SMS. So you use it on your phone. Most people use it on their phone. And just to really illustrate reality here, I am going to read this to you. Enter randomly chosen by the system from your password characters into an empty unmarked fields. I locked myself out of this account at least 2 or 3 times just by not understanding what was happening. And because this is a bank in Poland, the only way I could unlock the account, I literally had to fax in a notarized document for them to unlock the account for me. And then when they did, I'm like, okay, I got it this time. So here's what this actually means. This actually means is you have a password, right? It wants you enter the first character of your password. In your head, ignore the second, third, and fourth. And then just get the 5th, right? But skip the 6th one. Then do the 7th and 8th, 9th. Skip 10 and 11. Okay, okay, I think. So what do you end up doing here? You end up writing it down. Because how else are you going to do this? And they have these requirements that they have to have the special characters and the uppercase stuff and this is torture on a global scale. Right? Login and username systems dole out more human misery on a daily basis than all of our combined news channels. So, this is the world we live in. Now, let me show you the other side. On the new iPhone X from Apple, they say your face is your password. You just look at the phone. If you're using a password manager, like a 1Password, you can auth into your apps and sites just by looking at your phone. It's like, oh, hey, Luke, come on in. Now, people may freak out, privacy, facial recognition. But like, what kind of world do you want to live in? Do you want to live in the enter randomly chosen by the system from your password characters into empty unmarked fields world? Or do you want to live in like, hey, Luke, I know which side I'm on, right? And I want to kind of stress one point, which I'm going to stress a few more times here. But this is bending humans to the whims of a back end, of a database. You know, like you have to do this because there's keyloggers. So, This is bending your technology to people. How do you recognize other people in the world? You frickin' look at them. How should your phone recognize you? By looking at you. And when you think about this, again, like, this is the stuff I think we just sort of, I don't know, ignore or take. Why is Luke talking about usernames and passwords so much? Did you know that according to Apple, people unlock their iPhone 80 times per day? On average, you have 14 waking hours per day. That's every 12 minutes, on average, there's an unlock. There is about 1 billion active iOS devices right now. 80 times a day times 1 billion active devices on the planet. Think about the scale of that, right? What if you were just able to make things 0.1 seconds faster, 1 second faster, 3 seconds faster? What if you were able to go from an error rate of 1 in 50,000 to 1 in a million? You know, what if you increase the security, the speed, the ease of use of this interaction, at least in any way, shape, or form, the impact you're having is insane. It's a really, really big deal. Okay, let's leave that one aside and talk about another one, which again, thank you, conference, for setting me up for this one, because this is one I've been talking about forever. First of all, you want to know who people are so you can do things for them. Luke, here's your stuff, right? That's what sign in and all that stuff is about. Personalization, getting to your things. But then you also want to be able to get stuff and pay for it, and companies want to be able to make money, right? So enter our friend checkout. And this is, again, one of those critical linchpins that exist out there. And while it's been on desktop for a long time, thank goodness people have taken that and put it on mobile as well. And by put it on mobile, I mean all of it, right? This is literally all of it put onto a mobile screen. And you look at this and people laugh, and the reason why you laugh is because when approached with something like this, you know, there's a few obvious reasons this is suboptimal. You look at this, what do you think? Is anybody like, woohoo? Here we go, right? No, you look at this, you're like, oh, crap. This is going to suck. And that's how you set up, you know, this critical point of interaction with people. Just taking these form fields and just doing a little bit of design work on them can greatly help, right? You look at this, like, okay, I could probably do this. This isn't so bad. And what we've really done here is just a redesign. I can walk you through this later if you want. Like, how do you get from that to this? I've got the slides to show that. And when you do this, right, and by the way, why does this happen? When faced with too much stuff, people choose the easiest path, which is what? Walk away. Abandonment, right? That's the easiest thing they can do. Get out of there. And it's not just these perceived feelings of complexity, these instinctive feelings that's going to take a long time or feel bad. There's actually measurable benefits to improving interactions like this. When comparing these two designs, this one over here is 40% improvement in interaction rates, improvements in conversion, and all that good stuff. And you can do a lot, right? I want to point out that the opportunity space is huge. This is a big retailer in the US. This is actually a pretty streamlined checkout form, believe it or not. It's just one page. It's only 22 inputs. Only 22. I say that with a straight face. It's only 22. It's not so bad. But they took this and they cut it down to 5 inputs, which is, a huge deal. So how do you go from 22 questions down to 5? Right? Well, I'll show you a couple of techniques that they used. And hopefully some of these techniques are generic enough that you can use them in multiple places. But the first field that they have here is name. And one of the things that they did is they just made name one field. That's it. And the principle at work here is avoid splitting input fields. I can show you some good reasons why later on in the Q&A if you want to talk a bit more deeply about this. Once people are in an input field, you want to keep them in the input field. And if you've ever watched the usability study where there's 2 form fields, one for first name, one for last name, I guarantee you've seen somebody do this. Right? Because in our brains, our name is our name. And we just think of it as this single coherent entity. And so this kind of jolts us a little bit. So people encounter the first name field they see and enter their complete name. The other reason for doing this is if you actually look at the reality of how names are structured around the globe, what you find is there's some places where people just have 1 name. There's some places where people have 8 names. And a single input field is actually much more representative of all these global differences that exist out there from 1 name to 8 names. And I know what all of you in the back are thinking, but my database, it stores things with first name and last name. Must serve the database. And that's exactly the problem. You know what a form is? A form is the name-value pairs in a structure for storing data on a computer barfed out as labels and input fields to human beings. Right? That's what all these forms are. You know what the checkout form is? These are the fields that we need. These are the name and value pairs that we need in order to process a payment system. How will we do that? I know. Make that person do it. It's the technology tail wagging the dog, right? We're letting the database be in charge. People ask, when's AI going to take over? It already has. Go look on the internet, right? Every single form, that is the computer in charge of you, not you in charge of the computer. Anyway, rant off for a second. What about address? That's the next field. And cleverly, what they use here is the Places API from Google. And what this actually allows you to do, it uses geolocation. And usually you type just a couple characters and your whole address is there. So it knows where you're at. You only have to type a couple characters, and it immediately collects your entire address through autocomplete suggestions. So not only does this make it faster and easier, but it actually minimizes errors by a huge amount because it gives you the complete valid address as understood by shipping and carriers and all those good things. So that's kind of cool. Less errors there, less effort. And I know this works really well for a number of reasons. Here's an example of kind of the principle behind it. We did some testing behind 2 variants of collecting addresses. In the first one here, people had to enter, this is in the US, so it's kind of US address format. You had to enter the city, enter a state, enter a zip code, right? These 3 things. In this variant here, you would just enter your zip code. And generally in the US, we can get your city and state. Maybe there's 2 or 3 variants that you have to pick from. But pretty much we can infer those additional 2 fields from that one. And so we kind of put these 2 things against each other across a couple different retail sites and saw overall how do these perform. And what you basically saw is one that used that pattern took about 21 seconds and was only 28% preferred. And this one took only almost 8 seconds, and about 3/4 of people prefer that kind of structure, right? People were also, if you do the math on this, 93% faster with this new method, which is a pretty big deal, right? So the majority of people prefer it, but it also makes things faster and easier. We then use the same principle that we used for address for capturing an email address. And this is autocomplete, right? So as soon as you hit that @ we give you a bunch of valid autocomplete things. Again, I think I was set up for this talk with somebody. I think it was Andre had a little like typing is hard, and the example he used was him mistyping Gmail. Right? And the reason why you see a bunch of these like re-enter your email addresses, do any of you have one of these monstrosities on your site? Right, so why do we force people to re-enter their email address when typing it once is hard enough? Because a bunch of times we get what's called a hard bounce, an invalid email, because maybe people have made a mistake, what have you. And that's not what you want when you set up a new customer relationship. So people ask twice to cut down on errors, but that's pretty onerous. And if instead, when somebody enters an email address, if you do a little bit of inline validation, something like this, right? Did you mean lukew@gmail.com? And somebody can just tap this and it auto-corrects it for them. So this kind of real-time feedback decreases hard bounces about 50% of the time. So there's stuff backing these things up, right? Last but not least, when it comes time to collect payment info, we're using two things here. Scan credit card, which is from the operating system, and then an input mask to capture all of your payment info. This thing, when somebody actually taps it, they just use their camera to take a picture of their credit card. It's quite efficient and good when people tap it. The problem right now is not a lot of people are using this. So good stuff happens when this gets used. Doesn't get used as much as it arguably should be. So maybe an argument for increasing the visibility there. Now, how does the one on top work, though? Because people often ask. Effectively, the way we capture this information for a credit or debit card inside of one field is you just start entering the number. We tell you what kind of card it is because we can detect that from the pattern of the card. As soon as we determine this is a valid card, we'll let you move on. Otherwise, we'll throw an error here. If it's valid, we just slide it over. Slide it over. There we go. And remember, you're on this big numeric dial pad here. I think Andre mentioned this yesterday too. Because month, year, your expiration date, that is just numbers too. So we can capture that. And then we change the icon to show where this little security code is on that specific kind of card, because it's in different places on different kinds of cards. And you capture that, and you have everything that you need to process a payment. So, okay, blah, blah, blah. And then last but not least, use this as my billing address. People can change that if they want, but there's a smart default. And so basically what this boils down to is, if I can come back to this last slide for half a second, this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 field checkout form. That's it. All right? The whole thing, 5 inputs, and you're done. And the impact of all this work is significant. More people start buying. So if you go and do all these things cumulatively, what happened in this redesign for Staples is they had 10% more people starting checkout. They were able to complete checkout faster. They had reduction in guest checkout clicks. Overall conversion went up something like 10 or 11%, if I remember correctly. So a lot of good things happen from reducing these 21 fields down to 5. Right? 2 out of the 5 fields are also auto-suggestion fields. There's smart keyboards for everything. They also save the order info pre-populated on your next visit. They removed a whole bunch of features that caused errors. And so from this, they got a whole bunch of good things happening. Right? Yay. And again, I have to reference the earlier talk. This is a lot of the stuff that this payment request API is trying to do as well. So if you're on this little shop, you hit checkout, up pops all of this stuff pre-filled and done for you based on the stored payment credentials you've got across all these different web browsers, where you're going to ship it to, how are you going to pay, and you just have to hit pay and you're done. So it's trying to use a whole bunch of those same principles that we just looked at there in one place. And this one's a little earlier. I don't have a ton of stats on this yet. But I do know that in at least one experiment, we had a huge reduction in how long it takes people to get through this. So this is good, but let's go back to Amazon for a second and see what they are doing with their checkout flow. So if on Amazon I want this pretty little turtle, right, and I want it now, I can hit buy now, up pops this little slider, and I just go, shows up at my house the next day. One tap, one swipe, done. Not only is this process super fast, but it actually works really well for how people use these kinds of devices. And I'm going to take a half a second detour here to illustrate this. What it's trying to do is account for kind of this one-handed use that's so common on devices. Today, smartphones are getting bigger at the expense of tablets and small phones, as you can see. All right, this is kind of a trend that's been going on for a while, but just to show you how dramatically this has changed. 3 years ago, in 2014, only about 8% of active smartphones were between 5.5 and 6 inches. Anybody want to guess what it is now, 3 years later? 80? That's pretty crazy. 30? Okay, a little more reasonable. 43. So you're both kind of right. But that's a giant jump, right, over a 3-year period. Because this is globally. So not only are these devices getting bigger, if you actually look at how people are interacting with these devices, you see that between 3 and 7-inch screens, 90% of the time people are using them in this portrait mode. As you get to larger screens, 7 to 9-inch, it's only 52%. And by the time you make your way to these large tablets, the majority switches over to landscape mode. So 2 things going on here. 1, phones are getting bigger. 2, they're generally used in portrait mode. And why we care is this is how people hold the phone. And it's comfortable down here. It really hurts up there. So having these interactions be aligned with kind of the bottom of the device is a good thing. Because you can, with that one-handed portrait mode, you can actually reach those interactions quickly and easily. So good UI to kind of keep people overall happy. Now, coming back to the bigger story here. A lot of iteration, right? We can spend a bunch of time taking these checkout experiences and hopefully, as I showed you, making them a lot better. And once again, I don't want to poo-poo this process because, is that a technical word, poo-poo this process? I don't want to diminish the impact of this process because as you saw with a whole bunch of the examples, you could do a lot of great work here. You can get a lot out of this. But once again, guess what I'm going to ask you? Are we just bending to the whims of our database name value pairs and what we've put on desktop and laptop computers and trying to do the best we can with that on small screens? Can we go further? Amazon certainly thinks we can go further, right? What they got down to here is 1 tap and a swipe. And they've done even more. So let's kind of move away from this and look at this thing. This is the Amazon Dash button. This is a Wi-Fi connected device that is essentially a single-use item. So all you do here is tap it if you want more of that. That being laundry detergent. Want more laundry detergent? Hit this button once. And now you may say, well, that's kind of weird. Why am I going to carry that around? Well, here's what you do with it. You just stick it on your laundry machine. Because when do you realize you're out of laundry detergent? When you're doing laundry, right? Which is usually at the laundry machine. So, granted, you probably are on your smartphone too, I guess, while you're doing laundry, right? I don't know. People never seem to put these things down anymore. But where you realize you're out of laundry is when you're in the laundry machine. So in context, this makes a ton of sense. You don't have to pull out the phone, find the app that you want, do a search for laundry detergent, pick the one that you actually always buy, hit the buy now button, and then even if it's a tap and a swipe, you're already several minutes into the process, right? Why do you want to do that? Just press it once and more detergent is on its way. Another example from Amazon. They just bought this big grocery chain called Whole Foods in the US. But before they start kind of implementing whatever their plans are there, I want to show you what they've been doing with physical stores. So this is a service called Amazon Go. And I absolutely love this tagline. Anybody know why I love this tagline? No lines, no checkout. No checkout, right? How about an awesome North Star? Instead of let's optimize checkout, how about let's not have checkout at all? I think that's just fantastic. But here's how it works, right? From a user perspective. So this is a cool dude. And this cool dude is just going to walk into Amazon Go. He just has his phone near him so it can kind of register when he walks in. And then he finds an awesome sandwich, as cool dudes do, and he walks out. That's it. Here's another woman, also probably pretty hip. Just takes a bunch of stuff, literally taking stuff, putting it in her bag, and when she has all the stuff she wants, she just walks out. Now, after you get over your feelings of immense guilt, remorse, and shame, because you've been conditioned to feel that way, right? You realize, wow, that was awesome. They call this just walk out shopping. And it's an attempt to bring this frictionless shopping experience that we saw in mobile, right? They got it down to one tap and a swipe. They're trying to bring that to the real world. Does anybody want to sit there waiting in line, then you'd put your stuff out and it gets scanned, and, right? Well, good things do not happen in those lines. Maybe once or twice. But in general, it's like a bad part of human existence, right? So they're getting rid of it. Now, that's how it works from a user perspective. Take what I want, sandwich is awesome, walk out. What's actually happening behind the scenes? That's a totally different story. Here, I can throw like every tech buzzword at you. Machine learning, object recognition, visual image perception, machine calibration, blah, 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 blah. Because this is what it looks like. How Amazon Go actually works, right? There's a near field sensor. You have to have the kind of phone somewhere available so it can assert that it's you. And once it validates that it's you, you're good to go. So at that point, there's cameras that kind of uniquely identify a human, so it knows that there's this type of human. And those cameras capture what you're actually picking up and what you're not picking up. So there's a lot of kind of image recognition going on, both to recognize the actual item itself and the people. There's microphones around that sort of tell the cameras where to go look. There's a whole bunch of different sensors on the shelves, infrared ones, pressure ones, load ones. Again, they kind of back up if an item was taken or put away. And cumulatively, net result of all of these cameras, microphones, and sensors is they have this real-time view of everyone inside the store and all of the objects in the store. And so this is where a lot of the machine learning stuff comes into play, because that's a huge amount of data. Video generates just crap loads of data, and then you have audio, and you have all these sensors, and they have to take all that stuff, parse it out to figure out who's taking what and how. Right? So lots and lots of technology behind the scenes. And it's all of this technology. That technology all looks something like this. Right? It's this big, complicated mess. Right? Machine learning, facial recognition, object detection, machine perception, all these things. And you need all this hardware and software. But what does Amazon do with all of that hardware and software, all of that complexity? It takes all this stuff and it just sort of shoves it over here. Right? It takes the technical complexity as a burden on itself. It doesn't show it to the customer at all. So the customer can just walk in, take a sandwich, and leave. That's it. That's how you make a happy human. When somebody gets the benefit of all of this technology that's working for them, and they can just do what they normally do, walk around, take stuff. Oh, I want this, okay. And this, I want to stress, is the opposite of what we saw with the username and password forms. It's the opposite of what we saw with checkout forms. Right? What we're doing there is we're taking all of these things, we're taking name-value pairs, and we're spitting them onto a web page and giving it to people. We're not taking that burden onto ourselves, as we're doing here. Another example of this, come back to the Amazon Dash button. You think this is like a small, trivial thing, but it's another great example of this philosophy. This thing has Wi-Fi. It connects to your network. Through that network connection, it authenticates against your account, right? And your account, when you hit that button, triggers not only payment processing, which is a complicated thing in of itself, right? But then that order goes through Amazon's fulfillment network. So it gets routed to these crazy warehouses where robots go and find the detergent, put it in a thing, put it out for shipping. Then there's a real-time global delivery network so that when the laundry detergent shows up at your house, you get a little message like delivered the minute it gets delivered. So behind the scenes here, there's a vast pool of technology working so you can just go, laundry detergent, and it's there the next day. Tons of this technology working for you, but all you need to do is just, say this, right? It's a very frictionless, a very natural experience. And sticking with this theme for a second, I'll come back to Apple for a minute. They have this new thing called AirPods, which is a nice example of this sort of frictionless, graphical user interface-less interaction. So how do you connect these headphones to your device? Literally, the only thing you do is you open the lid, and it pops up and says connected. You don't click on any buttons. You don't find the Bluetooth device and then hit it and spin and then pair and enter a 5-digit code. Have you ever done that? Yeah. Or God forbid they connect it through a Wi-Fi network. And you just flip it open. It connects. When you want it to play music, you know what you do? You just put it in your ear. It starts playing music. You want the music to stop? You just take it out of your ear. Play the music. Stop playing the music. If you want to charge them, you just put them in the case. Right? There's no graphical user interface here, right? There's no tapping on buttons, looking for links, scrolling through lists, nothing. Another nice example of this. This is the Google Home, and there's other kind of voice assistants. But if I want to do something, I can just say, OK, Google, set a timer for 5 minutes. It's done. I don't touch any graphical user interfaces. I don't move any dials, knobs, press start, open any apps. Nothing, right? I just talk to it to get answers and help manage tasks. And hopefully you're seeing a bit of a pattern here, right, between these kinds of devices. And the pattern that I see between these kinds of devices is this contrast between what I will just kind of loosely call a natural user interface versus a graphical user interface. Bill Buxton over at Microsoft has a more formal definition of this, which he calls interfaces that exploit skills that we have acquired through a lifetime of living in the world. And I like to think of that a little bit differently. I like to think of it as the system, the hardware, the software bends to the human, right? We adapt to how we are. How do we recognize each other? By looking at each other. Oh, hey, you're Luke. Why can't my computer do that? Right? Why can't I just take something I want and walk out? Right? It's what I'm used to doing. Whereas here, find the button, find the icon, tap the field, enter. Right? These have people bending to how computers work. And I think these types of natural, frictionless experiences can serve as a great North Star for as we're thinking about these optimizations. Remember I said there's nothing wrong with iteration, but we have to know what we're iterating to. Visions and ideas and kind of goals that look a lot more like this, I think are great places to try iterating toward and moving toward. As another example here, we can just keep talking about natural user interfaces. What better kind of theoretical example of a natural user interface than what I see with my eyes, I can just capture. Right? What I'm seeing, I'll just take an image of it. Snapchat's ill-fated spectacles are kind of like this. You just sort of tap it, and it starts recording what you see. This seems pretty natural and easy. But the experience in the software to take those videos and images off the glasses looks like this. So first I have to open my phone, then I have to find the Snapchat app. Once I open the Snapchat app, I have to navigate their, mystery gesture or crisscross information architecture to enter memories. Once I'm inside of memories, I have to find the specific kind of memory that I'm looking for, which is a spec, which comes from spectacles. Then once I tap that days spectacles, I literally have to tap multiple times to find the specific video I'm looking for. Once I find the video that I'm looking for, I have to swipe or long press on that video. Again, these mystery gestures to be able to share it. Once I then share it, I have to pick who I'm going to send it to. And finally, I can actually get this thing to another human being. Right? So this software experience is almost the exact opposite of that hardware experience. It's this multi-step process. It includes this open an app and full UI kind of dance. And I kind of pushed on how do we want to hide this complexity from people, but many times our software surfaces that complexity to people. And we may ask why. Why do we do that? Because we can't make decisions. We don't want to do the hard work to decide what matters now. What instead we want to do is just let people do it. Right? What do we do with Bob's feature? Oh, just put it on the homepage. Well, people will figure it out. Well, okay, let's add Jane's feature over here. And there you go. It all fits, kind of, right? This was possible on these large screen devices in the past. We could just make everything fit. We didn't need to make a decision because we could show everyone everything. Not possible with mobile because mobile is a hell of a lot smaller. And so what mobile is, it's about getting people the right thing at the right time. Here's a very simple little example of this. If I come back to messaging, somebody sends me a message, what's your address? Well, look what pops up. My 2 addresses. I just have to tap it once and I'm done. Right? And it's this example of just the right stuff at the right time. Another nice example, this time on the Android side, and I'll stick with messaging. So somebody sends me a message in a language I don't understand. Up pops tap to translate from Android, and right then and there I can actually see what it says. I can hear it. I can do another translation, right? And at this point, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but Luke, I work on insert complex thing here, insurance, banking, invoice, blah, blah, blah. I can't do this, right? I do complicated thing that has to be complicated. I work in blank thing, must be hard, cannot be easy. Well, why? And again, I don't want to tell you every single interaction should be one tap, right? That's probably unfeasible. Damn, it can't hurt to try and get there, right? It can't hurt to try and take this perspective and try to push for these fast, frictionless experiences. Am I setting the bar too high by talking about these things? Why do I care so much? Well, there's actually real tangible reasons why I care. If you look at, this is 3G traffic patterns, and you look at different devices connecting to these mobile networks, right? Look at how the smartphone pattern works. It's a lot of these short, little bursty sessions. Just quick in and outs on the network, right? And remember, I also told you earlier that people unlock their iPhones 80 times per day. On Android, the number is pretty similar. So every 12 minutes, people are unlocking these devices, right? A lot of these short, little bursty sessions. Well, how long? If you look, the average time spent in one of these sessions is about 80 to 120 seconds, the average. But more than half of them are under 30 seconds or less. Now, of course, more active users have more sessions and shorter averages and then overall larger time spent. But in general, right, these things are not long. There's a lot of these things and they're not very long. And for these reasons, again, I've got to thank the conference for setting me up. We talked so much about page speed. Why do we talk about page speed? I think this stat was also shown. People hate slow stuff. Why do they hate slow stuff? Because they're unlocking their damn phone 80 times a day and they're in and out in 30 seconds. If you're in and out in like 30 seconds, half the time, 40 times a day, and something takes 14 seconds to load, you know what? That is going to suck. Super duper suck. That's why we care so much about this. Here's another way of looking at this, and I like this way much more. So they did this analysis where they looked at what causes stress, and they measured the cognitive load caused by certain situations. How much stress were things causing people? And waiting in line at the retail store, pretty stressful. Way to go, Amazon Go, right? Like they're trying to fix that. You know what's more stressful than waiting in line at a store? Watching a melodramatic TV show. Does she love him? I don't know. Are they going to get back together? Are they going to get back together? Pretty stressful. More stressful than that, standing at the edge of a virtual cliff. I don't know why this one's in here. I am always confused by this. I think it's because VR is a thing now. Oh, God. Right? Pretty stressful. What's more stressful than virtual reality cliffs? Horror movies. These things are designed to terrify you, right? Made to scare you and freak you out. So obviously quite stressful. Cause a lot of stress. You know what is more stressful than watching a horror movie? Experiencing mobile delays. Worse than melodramatic TV shows, virtual cliffs, and mobile delays. However, there is still something worse than waiting for mobile delays, and that is solving math problems. So at least we got that going for us. If you are a virtual math solving application on mobile, I'm sorry. Right, but again, why is this true? This is true because of the reality of how people use mobile devices. I'm going to shift gears to one other kind of study because I thought this one was really interesting. They put cameras on people and they had them go throughout their lives. And what they did was anytime the camera recorded a screen interaction, they measured it, they saw what they looked at, and they measured for how long. And in this study, the average interaction time was about 38 seconds for smartphones. Right? So same basic thing, short, frequent, fast experiences. But there was another device that they were measuring inside of the study as well, which was smartwatches. And the average interaction time for a smartwatch was 7 seconds. So if you think it's bad trying to make something for this, good luck, right? Conversely, though, if you can make something that works within 7 seconds, you're going to have a blazingly good time at 40 seconds, right? It's going to rock. So it's worth looking for a second. What are some of the things that people do on smartwatch interactions to make things quick? I'll just go through these kind of fast. In the earlier version of the Apple Watch, you had to explicitly save a workout. Nowadays, it just says it's done and it's been automatically saved for it. So what's happening here is it's actually doing the work for you. You don't have to interact with the stuff. It just takes care of it. Another example here, the first time you go through and use the workout app, it has all these equally used options for you. The second time, it remembers what you did and it makes that button first and big. Right? So it kind of adapts based off of your behavior. And this one is my favorite example. What happens if you are interested in objects flying in the sky, as I happen to be, you get a little tap on your wrist from the haptics, and you tilt your wrist like this. The accelerometer on the device shows that notification, tells you there's a satellite overhead. If you tap more info, then the magnemeter, which is the digital sort of compass on the watch, tells you the direction that it's in, and because it has GPS, it knows where you are and can kind of point you via that magnemeter in the direction that satellite is at. So cumulatively, what this looks like is, oh, satellite. Oh, hey, there it is. Which may seem sort of trivial, but I think it's actually really freaking cool how much stuff is working to just give you this super personalized view of the planet, right? And take what was previously possibly invisible and make it visible to you. So what can we learn from this 7-second thing? Take the work on yourself, learn from past behavior, make use of sensors, hardware, all good things to bring to mobile. And we can talk more about this later if you want. But it's this type of thinking I want to kind of emphasize, right? While it's great for us to continue optimizing and tweaking these critical interactions, can we approach something like login without the login form, right? What if our design goal for sign-in is no sign-in required? How does that change where we end up? Or checkout, right? What if we approach the goal of checkout design with no checkout? Does that end up looking something like this? Right? With these kind of aspirations, we can make more than just incremental improvements. Right? Most forms suck. Most graphical user interfaces are pretty freaking terrible. So what should checkout look like? Right? What is checkout without the checkout form? These natural user interfaces are increasingly around us and setting all kinds of new expectations. Whether you know it or not, people are experiencing these things, And it's setting kind of a frame in their head of what good is. If you go and walk up to a Tesla car and you have the key in your backpack or your pocket or whatever, you just sort of walk up and the handle slides open. Hello, owner. Just very natural. You're going to go into the car, okay, car will open up for you. The iPad Pro, if you tap it with the pencil, it skips the whole unlock screen, jumps right into your note-taking app, and leaves you exactly where you left off. Which is kind of how paper works, right? You put a piece of paper on paper and you can start drawing right away. You don't have to open an app, find the app. You just tap the pencil, it goes right back to where you were drawing before. And so there's more and more technology every day behind the scenes, right? All of this technology is getting built. We're creating more and different kinds of stuff every single day. But that doesn't mean we should expose people to it. People should just do what they do and let the machines do the heavy lifting. Take the technical complexity on ourselves, right? Make our goal to create happy, empowered humans and to hide as much of this as we can from their lives. And I'm going to leave you with one little example because I recently had one of these little happy moments. I ordered this thing that I was really waiting for from Santa Cruz Mountain Bikes. I was so excited. And so my hand got the little tap, and it says, your package has been delivered. I was like, oh, cool. So this, this information kind of came up on my wrist. And as soon as that happened, my phone buzzed, and my camera said, hey, someone's at your door. And so I tapped that notification. I saw the FedEx guy walking up to my house right there. And I just had this sort of like moment where I'm like, I am a cyborg. And why did I feel like a cyborg? I felt like my wrist was connected in real time, right? Through haptic UI to the nodes of a global delivery network. Like my wrist gets tapped, and what's behind the scenes, like FedEx's massive delivery empire in real time telling me precisely when and where they are. And someone's just like, hey, right? I felt very cyborgian. And when I was holding this in my hand, I was like, wow, I have a live audio video portal to another part of the planet triggered by object-aware motion detection. The camera didn't just say something. It said, there's a person in front of your house right now. And I hit the little button, and I could see that person literally walking up to my house while it was happening. So it's like I had left a pair of eyes on my front door, right? Very cyborgian. So I was super excited about this. I'm like, I'm a cyborg. And I posted this out, and somebody wrote, like, I don't get it. Like, is this new? Like, call me later when you got something cool. I mean, he basically replied, I was like, meh. So what I wanted to do is be like, dude, do you realize how much technology is behind the scenes, right? Not only is your wrist connected to a network that stretches across the planet, but the shipping network in real time is casting information through it and the camera and all this motion detection, machine perception. And so I did write that. But on the other hand, what I thought was, nice job designers at Nest. Nice job designers at Apple. Like, you took something that is so technologically advanced and complex. You made magic out of it, and more importantly, you made it feel so normal that this dude was like, whatever. All right, that's awesome. This is exactly the example of what I was talking about here. This is literally giving me a magic portal, pair of eyes to some other part of the world that recognizes when human beings are present, and it just feels trivial. That's a job well done. And why does this matter? Because we as human beings and all the other human beings on this planet don't have time to learn all this crap. We can't go and learn every single interface and muster like 20 new checkout flows and remember like 40 freaking passwords a day. Like, we just don't, and we shouldn't. We shouldn't have to wrangle all this technology, all these UIs, all these gadgets to get the benefit of it. Somebody else should do it for us, right? And I love this quote by Bruce Sterling, who's a science fiction author who became a design professor. But he makes exactly this point, right? We can't sacrifice infinite amounts of time and effort. Somebody else needs to do this. Some kind of well-informed, trained, educated people who not only make it their job, but make it their mode of being, their calling, their practice, their passion, the thing they care about, to create something that gives us as much power as possible while still making it manageable. And as he calls out, who's going to do there? Who's going to do that? And I don't care if you formally call yourself a designer or not. When he says designers, I take it to people who make things that other people use, whether you're called a designer or not. It's more the process of being a designer. But that's who can do this wrangling, right? Designers, that's our job. So hopefully some of these examples have inspired you. That's kind of the point here. Early on, we talked about the immense opportunity that's out there, mobile devices, huge audiences, growth, revenue, global scale, right? All those charts up and to the right, you probably forgot all about them. That's the world we live in today. What can we do now? We can really optimize a whole bunch of stuff. I showed you checkout and username and password. There's a ton of techniques, ways that we can improve things and have great returns. But we do have to ask ourselves, is that really the most we can make of this opportunity? Are we constrained by our databases? Are we constrained by the mental models we have from our websites and the things that we've made before that prevent us from setting a bolder, kind of scary vision? One that most of us would be like, I can't do that because I work in look, right? Is that what's holding us back? Because if so, there's lots of places where we can see things that, shift that dynamic, that change kind of our approach, rather than having people bend to computers and technology, having computers and technology bend to how people work, which is, I think, a really important kind of mindset to carry. And the reason why I care about this so much, because the next 10 years are going to move even faster than the previous 10. Right? Take a guess if we're going to have more technology, like next week. I think Google has 6 announcements just for next week, as we do every week. So things are going to move faster. There's going to be a whole bunch more stuff coming out. And this is going to become a bigger and bigger problem. And if you really want to create great experiences and connect with your people, start by looking at them as people, right? And acting and building and designing in a way that makes that okay. So that's what I got to kick things off for you today. We'll take a break, think about questions, and enjoy the beverages and facilities. Thanks.